disciple makers, and thank you for joining us. The Georgia Baptist Mission Board Discipleship Team, led by Scott Sullivan, exists to help churches take the next step toward becoming a healthy, disciple-making church. We've developed tools to help you, like the Watershed Principle, which identifies 6 main ministries needed to be a healthy church. The Spark Conference, a total church strengthening event that allows you to access keynotes and breakouts all year long for ongoing training in your ministry area. This year's conference features keynote speakers Fred Luter, Michael Catt, Todd Bolsinger, and Robbie Gallaty, as well as online and in-person regional events. Learn more at www.thesparkconference.com. We also have learning communities across Georgia to sharpen, encourage, and resource leaders personally and professionally. Find a community near you at gabaptist.org/discipleship. Don't forget you can find our previous episodes on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and your favorite podcast platform. Now let's join today's broadcast or podcast.
Welcome to our Georgia Baptist Discipleship family, and my goodness, are you going to be glad that you joined us. We have Clay Scroggins and PJ Dunn today, 2 leaders who believe in discipleship and have practiced that for decades, and lots of nuggets and wisdom that you're going to hear over the next few minutes. Well, Clay Scroggins graduated as an industrial engineer at Georgia Tech and has spent the last 20 years in the local church. He's a speaker, author, thinker, dad of 5, and can play Babylon by David Gray on his guitar. I still need to see the video on that. His doctoral work was on creating online environments for personal growth, and currently creates resources full-time for emerging leaders where you can see that if you go to clayscroggins.com. We also have PJ Dunn, our discipleship consultant in the North regions here in Georgia. He's got a passion for single adult disciple making. He is the president and CEO of Table for One Ministries as a side gig of our discipleship consultant team. And in addition to being the full-time, he's an author, speaker, and a content creator. He's an IT specialist, keeps us up and going for this broadcast, and a very close friend. And some would say that PJ Dunn is single-handedly responsible for shutting down Georgia in 2020. The facts are that PJ and his family moved here one day and the Georgia shut down the next day. I'm just saying, PJ.
It's a true statement. It's a true statement, God. That actually happened.
Yeah. Hey, Clay, welcome to our Georgia Baptist Discipleship family, Bubba. Glad to have you here with us.
I'm glad to be with you as well. Thanks, Scott. PJ, I want to switch bios with you. That was stellar. I love it. I wish I was more technically minded, and I wish I had the power to create a global pandemic too.
I was going to say that it's the pandemic one that everybody always puts on their resume, right?
That's really cool.
That's awesome.
No, good to be with both of you.
Well, I want to remind our audience too that our team has a stack of resources that we want to give away. So make sure that you leave a comment, share the link, and you'll get entry into today's drawing for a $50 gift card. And Clay just may be gracious enough to send you a copy of his book. His newest one is called The Aspiring Leader's Guide to the Future. The one that we'll talk a little bit about today is the How to Lead When You're Not in Charge, one of my favorite second chair books that has made an impact even in my own ministry. And if you do so, you share it, you just may get PJ Dunn to invite you over and get a picture with Gus, his 5th wheel travel trailer that has a personality.
And a Facebook group and a following, like not just a personality, it's out of my hands at this point.
Yeah, it's weird and awkward. PJ, kick it off for us, Bubba.
All right, a couple of facts in the workplace, and I'm going to put that in quotations of ministry that I wanted to kick off as we talked to Clay here this morning. So Clay, just a couple of facts that we were able to find. Some of these are from Soul Shepherding and other sites, but only a third of workers feel engaged and inspired by their leaders. And as we're talking about your book today, the How to Lead When You're Not in Charge, and we're going to talk about a lot of other topics. I thought that was an interesting statistic in its own category. But then you throw on 57% of employees quit because of their boss. So not only are we not inspired, not engaged, but then we're just going to quit because we don't like them. And then we get into the church part of that. So 3 out of 4 pastors since 2020, when I came to Georgia and apparently brought COVID, pastors have reported severe levels of stress. So 75%, more of these guys are just like having severe levels of stress, which ministry's always been stressful. So you have that on top of that. And then just a couple more. So 40% have intense conflict with a church member, and you pastored for over 20 years. And I'm sure you've had some intense conflict with a church member at times. But they're saying that happens at least once a month. And that rhythm, me being local church for 15 years, Scotsman local church, I mean, once a month to have that kind of an intensity is going to weigh heavy on you. And they're just saying that this is overwhelming. And then we've heard that statistic since we've all gone to seminary, that only 1 out of 10 pastors actually retire as a pastor. So now that we got some of those stats out there, I'm going to kick it to Scott so we can get the conversation rolling.
Yeah, it really is just great when you think about those statistics, Clay, because you may have experienced this. I wrote this down the other day. I've been trying to do a lot of self-evaluation coming on what we hope and think is the backside of the pandemic. And, I wrote down personal growth is a treasure, even when pain is your drill sergeant. And it really is a good segue into my first question for you, because I spent 3 decades local church, all of that second chair. It's just been the last 2.5 years I've been at the convention. And the most obvious question for those of us in that second chair is this: how do leaders lead when you don't really have the authority to do maybe everything you're being asked to do? Any thoughts there?
I do. I have a lot of thoughts there. I mean, that's what this book came out of. I worked at North Point Ministries for almost 20 years. Andy Stanley and a number of men and women started North Point in 1995. I started attending in 1998 and then went on staff in 2004. And I mean, that was my professional journey. I found myself believing a lie, I guess, that every time I got a job change, sometimes they were promotions. Whenever that happened, I would find it in myself again. And so that's where I would start with people, is I would say, well, I think you gotta back out a little bit, whether you're in a senior pastor role or whether you're in some kind of associate role or whether you're an intern at a church. You've got to decide for yourself, how do you see leadership and what do you believe leadership really is? I believe leadership is deeply spiritual. I believe God gave it to us. It's one of our greatest gifts that we have to impact other people and influence other people. And we've got to decide, do I have to be the boss to be able to lead? Do I have to be in a position of authority to be able to lead? That's the lie that I found in myself. I would get a new job. I would have more responsibility, and I would think, okay, now I can do what I've always wanted to do. Now I can push my ideas through, or make this project happen, or create this new program, whatever it may be. And then I would just over and over again realize, oh, it's not the authority that allows us to lead. It's not the position that gives us leadership. There really is something greater. There's something deeper. There's something more profound. And there's something that gratefully it works whether you're in charge or whether you're not. So that's what the book is all about.
That is really good. Now, so let me take a little corollary off of something you just said. There are going to be times when you're in second chair and you've got to do something and maybe you don't agree with what that person above you has asked you to do, or a direction there. When do you challenge authority? And have you learned anything, maybe any keys when somebody's asking you to do something and you've got to say, hey, well, let me push back just a second. Is there any, when do you challenge that? And are there any keys to being able to challenge and maintain the relationship?
Yeah, that is a difficult dance, but yes, if you're not challenging, I would say you're not leading. I mean, the very essence of leadership is challenging ideas and challenging systems and challenging new ways of doing things. And so whether you're in charge or not, of course, you should be challenging. And just to encourage people today, if you're waking up today and you feel like, man, I got to have a hard conversation with my boss because I feel like we've been saying that we're going to do it and we haven't done it, or I feel like I know the new way we ought to, or we're trying to get back together, we're trying to restart things, and I have ideas and dreams and hopes about how things should go, and I've got to have a hard conversation about how we're going to do that. That's not unusual. There's not something wrong with you. I think that is a sign of leadership. If you feel that urge, that burden, the urgency, I would say. I'll use a simple little case study. It's not, I guess, that simple, but it's not from the church world. But when I had gotten done with most of the manuscript for this book. This is probably in 2016, and I had kind of a similar thought that you just laid out, Scott, where I thought, you know what? my guess is somebody's going to read this and they're going to go, oh no, now I got to have a hard conversation with my boss. So how can I help people with that? Because I've had loads of those as well. And so I wrote a couple chapters on it, and I sent it to a friend of mine and let him read it. And he sent me back a message and said, hey, I like the content, but it's a little dry. Do you have a story that would kind of anchor it? Oh, wow. And so I searched and talked to a few people and ended up bumping into a guy who's become a friend. His name is Shane Todd. Shane's the operator for the Chick-fil-A in Athens, Georgia. And Shane has got a pretty remarkable story about this because he was leading his local Chick-fil-A. We can all everybody's been to their local Chick-fil-A a number of times, I'm sure. You can imagine what that might be like. The unique thing about the Chick-fil-A business model is those operators are in their store every single day, in their restaurants every day. Yeah. And so Shane's doing that every day. And people are asking he said we would get questions about a milkshake almost daily, multiple questions. And he said, this was probably, I think 2010 maybe when this took place. And he said, we had talked about it with the menu strategy team, but they just weren't we didn't feel like they were making it a priority. And we just knew we wanted to delight the customer. We wanted to really serve the customer well. And he said, and so without really, getting necessarily permission to be able to do it, we just started making a milkshake. And then he showed me the signs that he put, the little advertisement that he put out front of his local Chick-fil-A. I mean, it's those moving signs or painting signs that you just stick into the ground, or campaign signs. And it just said, now serving milkshakes, chocolate, vanilla, $2.99 or whatever it was. I mean, it was kind of janky when he showed me the picture of it. I was like, I cannot believe you did that. I mean, think about it. I mean, it's not as close. I would say it's not quite adding to the canon of scripture by adding to the Chick-fil-A menu, but you're getting pretty dang close by doing that.
He's walking a line.
He's walking a pretty fine line. And the way he did it, the way he challenged his authority, the way he challenged his bosses, he communicated. He wasn't silent about it, but I would say he communicated in some ways like a submarine. He was very strategic about who he communicated and how he communicated about it. He was like, this was not something we could just broadcast everywhere because we knew all the other stores would be like, well, how does Shane get to serve a milkshake? And the way he leveraged what was most important to the boss. At that point, Dan Cathy was the CEO, and Dan Cathy's big mantra at that point was second mile service, second mile service, second mile service, delighting the customer. And Shane said, I just knew, for us, this wasn't new, that we weren't adding something. This was just taking the ice cream that we already had and mixing it up and adding something to it that would just enhance it for the customer. It was going the second mile for the customer, which I thought was really brilliant, that he used what was most important to the boss to challenge up. I think there's something there, but what ended up happening, I mean, obviously the Chick-fil-A that they sold the milkshake that Shane and his store sold is not what eventually got rolled out. But, now the milkshake, I think there have been years where it's been named the #1 product on Chick-fil-A's menu, which is saying something for an organization that said we didn't invent the chicken, but we invented the chicken sandwich. But it's I find it to be a great case study on how to challenge your boss, when to do it, how to do it, and how to do it in a way that really leads to progress.
Yeah. And there will be peach milkshakes in heaven. I'm convinced of that.
I mean, it might be the only thing there is to drink or to eat up there. It might just be
it all day. It is. Well, PJ.
We know that, milkshakes will bring all the Baptists to the yard. So that's just a really great marketing thing there. And I really like the idea of being able to challenge authority, and we could probably do a case study between me and Scott, because he knows that I like to ask questions, and I like to be engaged, and I like to challenge. And but if it's not in a mutual respect, if there's not like a love and relationship there, it comes across as you're being defensive, you're being aggressive,
or defiant.
You're being defiant. And I'm like, oh, I'm not. I just asked the question, why did we put that signboard there? And it's just like, and so I know that in that leadership, that's been hard for me. And so I recently reread the book. I read it in its paperback form, and in comment on our comments right now, if you've read this book or if you're going to buy it right now. But I read it in its paper form about 5 years ago when it came out. I just recently did the audio. So it's been like a podcast with Clay. So you've been in my passenger seat for the last couple of weeks, about 6 hours worth, I think. I think you remember it probably took that long.
That's right.
But it's really good if you haven't done a book on tape and you have time in a car to be able to do that. But can you just break down those 4 behaviors that you talk about in your book for our tribe?
Yeah, the essence of the book is you don't have to have a title. You don't have to have the authority to be able to lead. Leadership's far more than that. It's really about influence. And it's about influence whether you're in charge or not. It's about influence if you're not the boss, certainly, because that's really all you have. You don't have the ability to go around and say, like, I am the boss, so do it. But even if you are the boss, that style of leadership is dying. It's never really worked, and it's certainly not going to work in the future. So if we're really trying to figure out, well, then how do I cultivate influence? How do I create more influence for myself? Not to get promoted, not to make more money, not to get a bigger job, but to love other people better, to serve other people better, to be able to move our church forward, to be able to reach more people for Jesus. Whatever your intrinsic motive is, I think there's certainly some really holy motives that we can have in trying to cultivate more influence for ourselves. And so the book's really four behaviors that I knew for me, I had to start adopting with greater intensity and intentionality if I was going to develop or cultivate more influence for myself. The first one that I needed to lead myself, I knew, look, whether I'm well led or not, I can always lead myself. I love that little proverb that a person without any self-control is like a city without walls. Mm-hmm. That our first priority in leadership has got to be, do I have boundaries? Do I have the ability to govern this little organization that God has given me? And then, of course, Jesus says, if you're willing to be faithful with a little, then you're proving that you're able to be trusted with more. There's a quote by a guy named Thomas Watson, who was the CEO of IBM in the mid 20th century. He said, nothing so conclusively proves your ability to lead others as what you do on a day-to-day basis to lead yourself. Nothing so conclusively proves your ability to lead others as what you do on a day-to-day basis to lead yourself, which is really, I mean, he's really ripping off what Jesus said, that if you can lead here, if you can be faithful with this, then you will be entrusted with more. So step one is I got to lead myself really, really well. I've got to choose positivity is the second one. The attitude you bring is more important than your ideas. It's more important than your education. It's more important than your experience. At your funeral one day, nobody's going to be saying, man, that guy was so educated. He had the best ideas. He was just so smart. No, people are going to say, hey, he brought a lot of energy and he brought it every day. And not enthusiasm, not this extroverted, outgoing. Sometimes it's introverted. Sometimes it's a more quiet type of energy. But it's that forward thinking, can do, anything is possible, hope-filled positivity that has the power to change things. I mean, a couple of modern day examples right now, America's crazy over Ted Lasso, and that's one of the qualities that he brings. He's this uber positive character. I would say a real life character, President Zelensky from the Ukraine. I mean, he has just made a massive difference in the world because he's bringing this undying force of will every single day. They're comparing him to Winston Churchill in his moment during World War II. But he's a remarkable example of somebody who's choosing that kind of attitude on a daily basis. The third one is to think critically, that I would be able to, I mean, it's really what you were just referring to, PJ, but that desire to challenge things and to make changes and to have ideas and to dream and to think about how things can be better. That is a skill. It's not leading when we're not in charge. It's not just about, singing that song from the Lego movie, everything is awesome. Ba, 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 ba. I mean, it's not just going around going like, oh, best day ever. That was amazing. That was incredible. Couldn't be better. I mean, it is about bringing this sense of positivity, but it's also about saying, hey, we need to make things better. Let's improve things. Let's connect. Let's notice things and connect things and question things and bring value to what we're working on. And that is the skill of thinking critically. And of course, the danger is that we become critical, which is always dangerous for anybody who's a more analytical type. But you can grow in it. You can be a critical thinker and you can do it in a positive way, whether it's a skill or not. You can grow in it for sure. And then the last one is rejecting passivity, that we wouldn't be men and women who are waiting on our moment to be in charge. I mean, this is one of the hardest parts of not being in charge is the leader, the authority figure, the person in charge gets to make the decision. That's the way God created authority, Romans 13, right? That there is a structure there. And when you're the business owner, when you're the CEO of the church, when you're the senior pastor of the church, of course, you're going to be more inclined to think more deeply and to think more consistently about how to make things better. But you don't have to wait to be in charge in order to start doing that. In fact, one of the things we all have to do is reject the passivity that wants to get all inside of you when you're not necessarily in control. And of course, the lie is that when you're the senior pastor, you're not really in control anyway. There's some power brokers and there's still people that you're trying to lead. And either way, we have to reject the passivity that wants to get inside of us when we're not in control. So those are the four big ideas: lead myself, choose positivity, think critically, and reject passivity. That, at least for me, that's what I need to do on a more consistent basis to try to continue to grow in the influence that God's helping me grow.
And in that vein, like I don't know, for me, like different ones, I struggle at different jobs. So working at multiple different environments and different bosses and different situations, nothing's ever the same. So if I were to look at those four and I was to say, okay, which one was the hardest for me and which one's the most important, it's literally changed at every different place. It's just like, well, I need to think more critically. My last ministry where I served, I had to reject passivity. Right. And I had to choose positivity, like really, really hard, like on a consistent basis. But when I came here, I remember showing up to our first meeting with Scott and a couple other guys, and these guys are sharp. They do discipleship every day, all day. And I throw out some comment and they look at me like, did you learn that in elementary school? Like, good for you. Like, did you? And I'm like, oh man, what am I gonna do?
Here we go.
I got to work harder, And so I probably do the shower thinking thing that you mentioned in the book too, like a lot, where I'm like, okay, I got to think deeper. I got to go and get a little bit. So which one, is hardest for you? Which one's most important? And, what's your favorite episode of Seinfeld? Go.
Have you introduced Seinfeld to your 8-year-old, PJ?
I have not yet, but I will.
There's a blog that I found that has like all the episodes ranked in order of just how clean they are, how inappropriate they would be. And so I'm starting from the top, obviously. And my kids, my 10-year-old and 12-year-old, I mean, they have really fallen in love with it. But PJ's referencing, I quote Seinfeld a few times in the book. But I love your point that there are seasons of life where, one of those or a few of those are harder than others. And you're right, as my job changed, but also as the season of life changed, there were some that became harder. I would say for me, choosing positivity early in my career was fairly easier for me. I'm generally a positive person. The longer I was in our organization, the more I felt confident in my own thoughts and ideas and leadership ability and just philosophy and model for ministry. I would say the more difficult it was to choose positivity, because you start seeing your own vision for, man, this is the way I think it ought to be. This is the way I wish it were. And then you start having ideas and plans and systems and processes on how you think we could get there. And then there's, it's just not easy to make that happen. And I'm not always right, that even though I think I am. So I would say that the choosing positivity for me, that was actually the moment for me of making the decision to resign. That was a big part of it. Was I was having such a difficult time resetting my positivity. I was finding myself frustrated about things that were completely outside of my control. There's kind of three buckets. There are things that we have control over. There are things that we have zero control over. And then there are things that we can influence. And most things fall into that middle bucket. But I was finding myself frustrated about things that I had no ability to influence them, change them, affect them. And I was getting real frustrated about those. And that's not anybody else's issue other than mine. That is my own issue. And so I would just say, for those of you that are having trouble resetting your positivity, there is, of course, some soul work that you can do. And I love everything you said, all that data that you gave us at the beginning about how difficult ministry is right now. There's some rhythms that we can employ in life to help us get to a healthy place. But if you get to a point where you've done all of that and your friends have mentioned it and your spouse has mentioned it, I do think putting on the table, maybe I need to do something different. whether in the church world or not. I think that's a worthwhile conversation, because sometimes a change of scenery is an important thing. And pastors, I remember when I was in student ministry, it was always like less than 2 years. No one lasted more than 2 years. But there are some pastors that have been in their roles for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And there's nothing wrong with a change of scenery. Sometimes our brain needs something different to kind of help us reset that positivity and reset the energy that we know we need to bring on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's good. And that the change that happens when there's that change of scenery, it's like my dad said, really, I guess it's probably 2 weeks ago. He said, sometimes the worst thing is the best thing. That in pandemic, we're seeing lots of people resign and retire and with no succession plan, and some people being let go, a lot of people being let go. I think the last stat I saw in Georgia was we had 500 churches that don't have a pastor right now. And
Wow.
and that idea, and what I love about what you've just uploaded there, Clay, on those 4 big thoughts is you've broken some big concepts into some bite-sized pieces. And for a lot of our leaders, they're not looking for a total revolution of everything that they do. They're looking for that quarter twist moment where they can make a little change that just zeroes them in on the target. So, man, thank you for sharing those 4 things. Now, in your book, you also write this, that great leaders lead like they're not in charge, even though they are in charge. And that can really be a burning bush moment for a lot of our guys that are in charge. Can you dive into that for just a moment and unpack it?
Yeah, I use this little story to illustrate that. But when I was probably 21 or 22, I was in Atlanta going to school at Georgia Tech, and I had this internship in the governor's office in his policy group. It was kind of like a class that you took that you also, the internship is a part of it. And I'll never forget sitting outside. I mean, I was getting copies and making coffee, like interns do. But, one of the great things about a role like that is if you're faithful and if you're not afraid to do some of the dirty work, you end up finding yourself in some really interesting rooms. And I was oftentimes not in the room, but my desk sat right outside of this conference room where they would have a lot of their more contentious debates about policy. And I'll never forget this one particular day. I think they were debating or discussing or really arguing about the education budget for the university system of Georgia. And you could hear the voices rising, and it was getting very tense. You could just tell, even sitting outside of the room. And I heard, kind of out of nowhere, above all these voices, I heard kind of the banging of the table. And then I heard this voice that was yelling above everyone going, and he said this, he goes, "I am the governor of the state of Georgia. Listen to me." And I remember, as a 22-year-old, I remember thinking, oh no, something's broken. I had never read a leadership. I mean, I don't know that I had ever finished a leadership book. That's for sure. I hadn't been to a leadership conference. I don't even know what definition I would have given for leadership. But I just knew in that moment something, that feeling inside of you that goes, that's not the way it should be. I mean, these people on his cabinet, this was not, like Abraham Lincoln, team of rivals. I mean, these were people that probably worked on his campaign that helped him get elected. They all knew he's the governor, but basically what he's doing in that moment is he's having to rely on his authority. He's having to, I like the term, wave the gun of authority. He's having to say, hey, I am in charge. Do what I'm telling you to do. And as I mentioned earlier, that is a form of leadership, that command and control style of leadership. I mean, particularly that works in the military. We need it in the, especially when you're in the heat of battle. There are moments when you have to say, I mean, it works in sports. There are moments when the coach has to say, shut up and sit down. I'm the coach. This is what we're going to do. But in general, most people that are working at churches or working in business or working in everyday world, they're not going to follow someone that's leading that way long term. They'll do it for a day or a week or a month because we all want to stay employed and we all want a paycheck and we all like living indoors and eating. But long term, people aren't going to follow someone that's leading that way. And so that was kind of the big aha moment for me. Was I was trying to write this book really to encourage people that were in the same seat that I was in, stuck in the middle of an organization or in the second chair, as you referenced, Scott. But the principles are really just as true for the person in charge. That if you want to learn how to lead like great leaders do, you learn how to lead through influence, even when you're in charge, even when you have the power, even when you have all the authority. You lead through relationships, you win people over, you lead yourself really well, you choose positivity and think critically and reject passivity, even when you're the boss. And if you can learn how to lead through influence when you're not the boss, you'll be better at leading through influence when you are the boss. But even if you are the boss today and you're trying to think about things new or think about what's the quarter turn I need to make, learning how to lead through influence is, I think it's the key, not just for the people that work for you, but particularly for the people that attend your church. I mean, people want to follow someone that's willing to say, hey, here's the clear vision I'm casting. Here are the sacrifices I'm making to get there. And I want to invite you along with the journey. I'm not going to tell you what you got to do. I'm not going to force you. I can't do it anyway. I mean, everybody's a volunteer in life. Any one of us can quit and do something else whenever we want to, especially in this season where the employees have so much power because of the labor shortage. But I think the principles are just as true. They're just as true when you're in charge as they are when you're not.
And what I think is interesting, Clay, is that there seems to be this shadow or smoke or silhouette of authority that a lot of our leaders have, because even the lead pastors I talk to, a lot of times they say the same things, that I wish I had the authority to, they're the lead pastor. So it's almost like even no matter what your level of authority or leadership is, it's almost like it's an elusive goal to get to a point where you feel like I finally have all the authority I need. Because like there's always somebody over us. There's always an accountability. There's always boundaries for us. Now let's take this one step further here, because I also read a part that talks about this concept of like, what does it mean to be shocked when God uses bad leaders to accomplish his will?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the, you have these conversations enough, like you all do, everybody's got their thing. I'm sure, PJ, when you talk about singles ministry, there's probably like a couple of questions that are the most common ones you get, right out of the gate. And that was the most common one that I kept getting over and over again whenever I would talk about this topic, is they would go, raise their hand and go, all right, man, look, this is cool for you. And I'm sure this is all easy when you're working for Andy Stanley. Seems like a great leader, seems like a, moral person. But my boss is, basically, akin to one of the worst humans on the planet, or my boss is evil, or my boss is terrible, or my boss has no morality, or my boss is just an awful leader, or my boss is just, we have a lot of people that are in the role, but they've already resigned, but they haven't told anyone, right? They're just apathetic and they're just kind of coasting. And there's a lot of people working for someone like that. And so that was that question I would get over and over again. And I, at first it kind of befuddled me, because I thought, no, I mean, Andy Stanley he's been a massive influence in my life, but he's not the easiest person to work for. I mean, he demands a lot. He is not a super relational person. So learning how to read him and understand him is really challenging to do at times. He's been incredibly generous to me, and he's been a massive influence in my life, but I never felt like, oh, this is easy, man. This is cake. Like, I got this. Like, it was challenging. So then I had to step back and go, well, then what is it? And I think the truth is, whether you have a good leader or not, the issues are not all that different. That you got to learn how to cultivate influence, whether your boss is a great person or not a great person. And then the other aha moment for me was, looking throughout scripture, the history of Israel and the history of the New Testament, the history of the way the church began. You think, okay, I guess God only worked when there was a good leader in place. Well, that's certainly not true. I mean,
that's right.
Maybe like 4 out of 5 kings were, it's like, and he was a bad king and he was an evil ruler, like maybe 1 out of 5 was pretty good, but every other one was terrible. And God was still advancing his kingdom. God was still bringing salvation to people. God was still moving things forward. He was still using people to accomplish his purposes in the world. And so the reality that we've got to wait until we have a good leader for God to do something, that's just kind of ridiculous. And then thirdly, the growth, the most growth that all of us will have in life usually happens when we're under a bad boss. And so the idea that, oh, I work for a bad boss and therefore I'm just kind of waiting until I find a better one, that's silly as well, because, the resistance of a bad boss, if you feel like you're kind of bumping up against this boss that you just don't feel like is helping you or, giving you what you think you need, what you're learning, if you would open up your eyes and open up your ears and open up your heart to see, God, what do you want to teach me in this season? What you will learn in that season is so much greater than what you'll learn even by working for a good boss oftentimes, because that resistance creates strength. The same reason the weight room works the way it does. The weights are heavy because as we push through the resistance, we build strength, we build muscle. And the same thing is true with our character. The same thing is true with our leadership skills, with what God's trying to develop in us, that sometimes working for bad bosses is the best way to grow, because we have to find a new way. We have to find a different approach, or we have to figure out, okay, well, that's not working. I got to find a different way to do it. This is a dumb example, but that silly movie, Tommy Boy, with Chris Farley and David Spade, they keep saying over and over again, they keep running into all these obstacles, and David Spade's trying to beat it in his head. Don't take no for an answer. Don't take no for an answer. And I think that really is it. I think it's all about going, all right, I'm not going to take no for an answer. If the answer is no, I'm going to reframe it as not yet, and I'm going to find a new way. And that's what great leaders do. And you'll build that resilience more under a bad leader oftentimes than you will with a good leader.
And this applies so much, 2/3 of our pastors in Georgia are bivocational or single staff. And those guys that are watching today that sit in that first chair, but there are no other chairs, this is just as applicable. Everything you're saying when you're saying it, it's like, well, even if you have multiple hats and you're working in multiple areas to be able to provide for your family, provide for a life, you're still going to have all these same challenges, and you're going to have a boss over here and then a boss over here. But just because you're the pastor in this context doesn't mean you're even the boss. And so we're all in that place where relationships, especially when they're foundational on love and loving one another, like a 1 John 4 kind of love, like that builds influence. And I think that's been a big thing for me. And I want to share one example of where I've been really terrible about it, but I want Scott to go first. So Scott, you've been in ministry for a lot of years, local church. What's your biggest struggle regarding authority?
So I would say two things, PJ. And that's one of those self-assessment moments that's really hard to even talk about, because one of those is value. Like, a person needs to know that they're valued and that they're seen and celebrated for who they are and what they're doing. And if that employee, no matter what organization or family you're in, doesn't feel valued, then there's a disconnect and there's a pushing away that person goes through. And as a second chair, the pressures of that lead in our role of the lead pastor is so much, and it's so difficult that a lot of times, if you have a staff or if you have lay leaders, a lot of times you forget to value them. So that's one of those. That's why I love on our church strengthening team here. One of our core values is to be a constant encourager. We talk about it all the time. And it's one of our big 5, because it's got to happen. People have to feel valued. The second one really is associated for me, and it's just respect. So that need to be respected in an organization, it's real. Like, people want to have the respect when they're in an organization. But I would just give a caution here, Clay, and I don't know if you've experienced this or not, or seen this throughout your ministry, but that need for respect can become a deadly and destructive force if it's not sacrificed on the altar of Christ-likeness. Like, there is an element of selfishness that you can just fall slap apart and leave a church before you should have, quit before you should have, because I didn't get respect. And I'm just telling you, that's something we as second chair leaders battle. And perhaps that's the toughest lesson that I had to learn, is this thing just isn't about me, because I'm the most selfish person that I know.
Yeah. Well, and mine is very similar. It is really hard. Carrie Newhoff talks about this too, right? That it's a leadership trait to be able to say, where do I fail, and be able to self-assess. And he's talked a lot about that recently. And so, I mean, in similar vein for you, Scott. So, being in IT, being in singles, being in education, wearing all these different things, none of them have like this all-in authority kind of thing. And I've been that guy on church staff that says, You got to use software. It's going to help us reach people. Like, data matters. It's real names. I'm that guy in the room that's pushing it forward. Well, I was definitely not as savvy as maybe I am now. But at the root of my heart, about 5-6 years ago, we were in a meeting and we were talking about why putting notes in on a person was important. And I was started nice. We had that great presentation, great smile. Then somebody asked a question, then we came back to it. Somebody asked a question, they came back to it. So eventually I say the phrase, "because I said so," to this room. And I was so oblivious to saying it that I didn't know I said it. So it was almost 3 months later that I was doing an eval, and my boss said, "Well, you said this." I said, "When?" 3 months ago. Has everybody hated me for the last 3 months? Like, I'm a jerk. I can't believe I said that. No one told me. So I went and apologized to multiple people. Like, that's not the way I want to be. But like, when you struggle with authority and you just think, because I can tell you to do it, because I have the authority, you have to use the software, man, it'll make you say ridiculous stuff if your heart's not right with the Lord. So that's my confession. Hopefully Scott doesn't fire me over.
No, absolutely not.
That's a good story, PJ.
But just just a very vulnerable moment there. And so, Clay, I really want anything on those kind of issues that you really want to speak to, and then want to talk about the book too. So go.
Well, I mean, the respect thing, Scott, that was really that was very profound to me, because you're right. Respect is, of course, we all want respect. Everybody wants that. And I would say the two sides I feel on it. Number one, a better strategy than demanding respect is to be a respectable person. And just to go, you know what, I'm going to take all that energy of wanting them to respect me, and I'm just going to, and it's what you just talked about, PJ, that ability to look in the mirror and go, okay, well, let me just, have I been trustworthy? Have I been a person that's able to be trusted? I'm going to take all that energy and try to put it there. And that's been probably the most empowering part of this, the How to Leave Your Non-Charge message for me, is going, instead of all the anger and frustration and stuff going up, what if I can take it and allow God to use it to change something in me? So what do I need to do to be a more respectable person? And then the other side of the coin is, some of you are in a position where, or you're in a situation or relationship where you're not being respected, and you need to have a conversation about it. Maybe you need to go to that person that's in your church, or go to that elder and be, as humble as possible to just say, "Hey, I don't know if this would surprise you to know, but I do not feel respected by you, and I want to be respected by you. So I'm assuming it's something I've done. I'm assuming at some point along the way I did like what PJ said, and I said, well, because I said so, or maybe it's because I haven't done something you thought I was going to do, or because I haven't done it the way you want. But I really would love to know, what would allow you to respect me? Is there anything I could do that would help grow your respect for me? Because I really do want you to feel like you can trust me and that you respect me. And, God has clearly put me in this position. And for that reason alone, we should follow somebody. But I don't want you to follow me just because I'm the boss. I want you to follow me because you respect me. So would you help me help me understand that? I think that's an important conversation to have. And, resentment grows when we don't speak up. And somebody today is probably feeling something with a church member, or with an elder, or with maybe somebody on the team. And you just, the longer you don't speak up about it, the more resentment is going to continue to grow. And this is maybe a great opportunity for God to grow some courage in you, or to God to grow some humility in you, to be able to say, hey, I don't feel respected by you, and I want to be, so help me. I would say, but to answer your question, PJ, and where I have, my greatest failure in this area, there's a number of them, which I wrote about in the book, but for the one that came to mind first was, I am so guilty of thinking I understand the whole situation. And when I see somebody making a decision that I think is just preposterous or ridiculous, I get real critical and I get judgmental. And the worst is when you bring those assumptions into the room, into the relationship, and you go, well, why did you, whatever. I did this during COVID, or this is like summer of 2020. I'm working from home, like a lot of people were. And, we got 5 kids. Our kids are running around everywhere. It's loud. I'm like really trying to concentrate, focus in this meeting. And I had let our dog wander around in the morning. We had a puppy, and that drives my wife crazy when I do that. and he pooped in one of our kids' rooms. And my wife sends me a text about like 11 a.m. and she said, "Did you know that Tater Tot pooped in Cooper's room?" Tater Tot's the dog, Cooper's the child. And I said, "I did not know that. I'm so sorry." And she responded and she said, "I feel so disrespected when you let him roam around the house because I've told you I don't like that," or something like that. And I was like, whoa.
Oh.
Well, I mean, I had like the next hour and a half, I'm still in this meeting, trying to be present, whatever, but I'm stewing, just stewing. And so I come downstairs and I bring all that energy into the kitchen. And she, at one point in the conversation, she was like, "You can take all that energy back upstairs because that's not helpful down here." And I was like, got it. So I try to back off. So I started asking questions, I'm like, "Okay, so tell me about the situation. You found the poop?" And she's like, "I didn't find the poop. I stepped in the poop."
Oh, come on.
And I was like, "Oh no, you stepped in it?" She was like, "Yeah, the lights were off. I was going to get him some clothes because he needed to go somewhere. And I stepped in it." And I was like, "Oh, my bad." And I backed way off because you can find dog poop in the house. That's one thing. Stepping in it is like a whole nother level. And I try to let that story be a reminder to me when I roll into something real hot or angry or frustrated or they don't know or how dare they and I can't believe it. Maybe they stepped in poop and I didn't know, and if I knew that, then I would have a different attitude. So that's probably
there's some people,
that's my Achilles heel.
There's some people watching right now that have also stepped in some poop. I've done it in a staff meeting once or twice myself. So, like I do know what that
proverbial poo.
Yeah, the proverbial kind. So, and I think Scott has Tater, a dog named Tater now too, don't you, Scott?
We did. We just got a long story, Clay, you don't care about, but we've been through a really difficult season the last 8 weeks. And so we got a party Yorkie. And so my wife decided we're going to call her Tatum, which means that my boys and I call her Tater. And Tater Tot is the affectionate name we call our dog now.
That is awesome. I mean, we actually had to, what's the term, rehome our dog because our dog bit a couple of people, but bit an Amazon delivery person.
Ouch.
Yeah. And when that happened, that was kind of a hilarious conversation. My wife was like all in a tizzy about it, understandably so. She's like, "It's enough managing all this stuff with these kids, and I don't have time to try to keep this dog from biting." And she goes, "I'm actually thinking, should I just order less on Amazon?" And I was like, I you know what? Like, I think we'll solve the dog problem, but I do think we ought to keep that on the table, that option, because I think that's important.
Yeah, let's go back to that. So you're not having the magical Facebook Reels moment where they go up and they hug the mailman and they love seeing them every day. Not you. You're drawn.
Not with that particular Amazon worker. But I love the name Tater Tot.
So tell us, as we kind of look at wrapping it up here in just a little bit, but Clay, tell us about the new book. So Inspiring the Leader's Guide to the Future. You're on the moon, conquering it up there. Elon probably sent you up there. So tell us a little bit about, why our tribe should be interested in what you talk about.
Well, it's really the hope is that it would be a book for, the next generation, to give them some language to articulate what they're feeling about leadership, but also that it would give the next maybe the generation that's my age and above, that would give them some handles on how to understand the way the world is changing and what to do about it. I don't think all of the developments in the way leadership is changing, they're not all bad. I think some of them are good. And then some of them we do need to watch out for. We need to pay attention to. But I started researching the topic about, okay, so leadership is changing. It was so difficult to find any help. It was easy to find people saying leadership is changing. It was hard to find anyone saying here's how it's changing. And that was so important and is so important to me because I want to develop into the kind of leader that the future is going to demand. I bet everybody who's watching today wants to do the same thing. I mean, we don't want to be a leader that's calibrated for a world that no longer exists. We want to be the kind of pastors, the kind of leaders, the kind of servants of Jesus that know how to do what the Apostle Paul said, when he said, "I have decided I'm going to become all things to all people for the sake that I might win some for Jesus." And that's what we all want to do. But in order to do that, we got to hang something up on the wall to say, well, here's how it's changing. Here's where it's headed. Wayne Gretzky, the famous hockey player, He said, I don't skate to where the puck has been, I skate to where the puck is going. And learning how to anticipate how it's changing, and then learning how to develop into that kind of leader, I think is it's essential. It's essential for every single one of us. So the book's the subtitle is 9 Surprising Ways Leadership is Changing, but it's really a book that's about, hey, here's my view on how leadership is changing, and here's what we can do to begin to develop into, or to continue to develop into, the kind of leader the future is demanding.
That's so good. Well, like this discussion is so great because we're discipleship leaders. We are disciple makers. We're leading in our local churches. We're leading in our families, and we just can't do that effectively, Clay, when we're distracted, when we're feeling not valued and disrespected, and we're not handling that well, or we're not handling our conversations well. So thanks for all of the nuggets that you have dropped today on this broadcast. And just one more thought, if people want to get in contact with you, if they want to see what you're doing lately, because you're in a shift, you're moving away from, that 20 years of what you've been doing local church, and they want to look at resources, where can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say real quickly, my purpose is as clear as it's ever been. I still feel like God has made it real clear on my life that, hey, I want you, whenever there's opportunities to stand in front of people and open up God's word, that's what I'm doing. And the mission of my life, of how I'm going to do that, is not necessarily working at a local church full time for now. I don't know, who knows where life's going to take us, but we're really enjoying getting to serve a lot of different churches. And I'm preaching a lot on the weekends and speaking a lot. Yesterday I was with the church staff, and will be over the next couple of weeks as well. So still doing a lot of that. But yeah, I've got a podcast called How to Lead that is really created for people that are trying to understand how they can lead better. It's real specific issues to leadership. My website, clayscroggins.com, has got some resources and a weekly newsletter that I send out with some leadership thoughts and some links to some stuff that's really inspiring me, and then some levity, some humor, some hopefully not comedy from me, but things that are making me laugh, because I really I feel like we could all use a little levity in life right now. So
yes, sure.
Yeah, all that. And then on social media, I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. I think I have a TikTok account, but I'm not very active on it. So
that'd be awesome. Hey, now friends, look, let me give you just a closing thought as we land the drone here for a moment. So much of leading in the second chair is about being selfless and drawing our value from who we are in Christ, not from our professional position. And I love the way Cooper Kupp put it, Super Bowl MVP. He said, I play from victory, not for victory. And that comes from knowing who we are as a believer. And for those discipleship leaders, disciple makers, this discussion we've had today is critical for all of us, because we tend to make disciples that look like us. So if we don't get this right, we're going to be investing in people and subconsciously creating disciples that don't look like Jesus. They're going to look like us, and that is not healthy. And at the end of the day, this is a great mindset, because we serve for the glory of God, not for the gratitude of man. Clay Scroggins, PJ Dunn, thank you for being awesome and investing in our tribe today.
Glad to do it.
To be here.
Lana Melton, John Graham, thanks for producing. And I want to remind our listeners that we're only able to do this because you give to the cooperative program. So thanks for that. And I pray that today's discussion with Clay Scroggins and PJ Dunn will equip and inspire you to make world impacting disciples.
Thanks for listening. We want to continue the conversation from today's broadcast in a learning community near you. These learning communities are designed to celebrate your biggest wins, resource your greatest need, and help you finish well. We also want to give you a free gift, the 5 discipleship shifts most churches need to make to produce world-impacting disciple makers. You can download this resource by going to ministryboom.com. This 5-page PDF is a discipleship alignment checklist. The Georgia Baptist Mission Board is able to provide resources like this because of gifts from Georgia Baptists to the cooperative program. For more information on this broadcast and a customized discipleship plan for your church, visit gabaptist.org/discipleship. Engage with us on your time through Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and all podcast platforms. Lastly, if you've benefited from this conversation today, please share this with a friend as we seek to help churches make world-impacting disciple makers.